What if I told you the smallest coin in your pocket could be worth more than a brand new car? Millions of Americans have spent these pennies without knowing the truth. Old, dirty 1-cent coins hiding massive value. Some were made by mistake, some were struck in copper when they should not exist, and some were pulled straight from pocket change and sold for life-changing money. In today's video, you are going to see top old, valuable, rare U.S. 1-cent penny coins. Pennies that look normal, pennies people ignore. But collectors are hunting right now. Before you throw away your loose change, before you spend another penny, watch this carefully, because one of these rare pennies could already be in your pocket. Imagine holding a tiny piece of copper that tells the entire story. Imagine holding in your hand a coin that was born in the aftermath of World War II. A coin that reflects not only the economic recovery of the United States, but also the enduring legacy of one of its most important founding fathers, the 1948 Jefferson. Nickel is more than just a small piece of metal. It is a window into American history, design artistry, and the progress of the minting process in the mid-20th century. When we begin the journey of understanding the 1948 Jefferson nickel, must first travel back to its origins. The Jefferson nickel was first introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel, and it carried with it a new image of Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States on the obverse, and Jefferson's Monticello home on the reverse, sculpted by Felix Schlag. The design was intended to reflect both the ideals of democracy and the architectural beauty that Jefferson so passionately loved. By 1948, the Jefferson nickel had already been in circulation for a decade, but this particular year holds unique importance in the broader context of numismatics and American history. To understand the significance of the 1948 Jefferson nickel, we must examine the political and economic climate of the late 1940s. The United States was transitioning from wartime production to a booming post-war economy. The coinage system reflected stability as the country entered into a new era of prosperity and expansion. The nickel itself was made of its traditional copper-nickel alloy composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel. Unlike the wartime nickels of 1942 to 1945 that contained silver, the return to the copper-nickel alloy signaled normalcy after years of global conflict. For collectors and historians, the 1948 issue represents that shift back to peace and consistency. The Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint were all responsible for producing Jefferson nickels in 1948, and each mint mark tells its own story. Philadelphia coins bore no mint mark. Denver coins bore a small D, and San Francisco coins bore an S mint mark, found to the right of Monticello on the reverse. The mintage numbers were substantial, with the Philadelphia Mint producing over 89 million nickels, the Denver Mint producing nearly 45 million, and the San Francisco Mint striking about 11 million. While these numbers suggest that the 1948 nickel is not particularly rare in terms of overall survival, condition rarity tells a different tale, finding high-grade examples with sharp details. Full steps on Monticello and pristine luster is a true challenge, and it is these finer points that drive collector interest. The artistry of the Jefferson nickel deserves deeper attention. Felix Schlag's original design was modified slightly over time, with Monticello's details often appearing weak or flat on circulation strikes. Collectors of Jefferson nickels often focus on the full steps designation, a grading detail that indicates the steps leading up to Monticello are fully visible without wear or flattening. In 1948, this becomes especially important because production quality at the mints, varied coins from Philadelphia often exhibit softer strikes compared to Denver issues, while San Francisco pieces frequently show weaker details, making high-quality San Francisco coins particularly desirable among specialists. The story of the 1948 Jefferson nickel also cannot be separated from the cultural landscape of America. During that year, 1948, was a time of political contest, as President Harry S. Truman won a surprising re-election. The Cold War was beginning to shape international relations. The Marshall Plan was actively rebuilding. Europe and domestically the United States was solidifying its identity as a post-war power against this backdrop. Ordinary Americans carried 1948 nickels in their pockets, using them in everyday transactions at grocery stores, gas stations, diners, and movie theaters. The nickel became a silent companion to the daily lives of millions, embodying both Jefferson's vision and America's forward momentum. Condition, rarity, and grading standards make up another chapter in this coin's long history. Collectors today prize examples of the 1948 nickel in mint state condition. Those certified by professional grading services like PCGS and NGC often command premiums, especially when designated with full steps. A top-quality 1948 Jefferson nickel with full steps can transform an otherwise common date into a true prize within a registry set. In fact, registry set competition has elevated the status of even seemingly ordinary dates like 1948, as collectors seek perfection in every slot of their Jefferson nickel collections. Errors and varieties add another fascinating dimension. The 1948 Jefferson nickel is known for several die variations and minting anomalies, including repunched mint marks, doubled dies, and strike-through errors. Though not as dramatic as some other dates, these varieties capture the attention of advanced collectors, each one a reminder of the imperfections of the minting process and the human element behind machine-struck coinage. Studying these varieties gives us a glimpse into the technical side of mint production in the late 1940s, where dies wore out or were hand-punched with mint marks, creating subtle differences that have become treasures for specialists today. From a historical standpoint, the Jefferson nickel also reflects Jefferson's legacy as a thinker and statesman. Jefferson was not just a president, he was an author of the Declaration of Independence, a founder of the University of Virginia, an advocate for liberty and learning. His portrait on the coin is not just decorative. It is symbolic of the ideals of freedom, democracy, and architecture as an art of civilization. Monticello itself stands as a monument to Jefferson's intellect and vision, and in 1948, every coin that bore his home reminded Americans of that enduring legacy. For 2 full hours, one could explore the many branches of this coin's story, from minting techniques to historical parallels, from collector markets to cultural meaning. The 1948 Jefferson nickel is more than a simple piece of currency. It is a bridge between past and present, a tangible artifact of post-war America, and a continuing subject of fascination for numismatists around the world, whether tucked away in a collection certified in a holder or still occasionally found in circulation. The coin carries with it 75 years of history, artistry, and the enduring image of a man who helped shape a nation. Imagine holding in your hand a small piece of American history, a coin that has survived decades of change, from the aftermath of the Second World War through the Cold War civil rights struggles and modern digital transformations, and yet it remains a silent witness to all of it. This is not just a nickel, it is the Jefferson nickel of 1946, and it tells a story far greater than its 5-cent face value. Collectors, historians, and everyday Americans may look at this coin as ordinary. But when you dig deep into its design, production, and historical context, you realize this coin represents resilience, transition, and national identity. The Jefferson nickel had been first introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel, and was designed by sculptor Felix Schlag, who won the design competition. Schlag's portrait of Thomas Jefferson, facing left with a dignified expression, was chosen to symbolize America's third president, author of the Declaration of Independence, and a key architect of democratic ideals. The reverse depicted Jefferson's Monticello estate, with its neoclassical architecture standing as a monument to Jefferson's vision of liberty and enlightenment. Thinking by 1946, the Jefferson nickel had already endured a crucial change during World War II, when the United States altered the composition of the coin to preserve nickel metal for the war effort from mid-1942 to 1945. Nickels contained an alloy of copper, silver, and manganese, rather than the traditional copper-nickel blend. These were known as war nickels, and they carried a distinctive large mint mark above Monticello to indicate the change. When the war ended in 1945, the United States faced the monumental task of transitioning from wartime production to peacetime. Industry factories that had once built tanks and planes returned to producing consumer goods. Soldiers returned home, and America entered an era of optimism yet uncertainty. The 1946 Jefferson nickel became the first year in which the coin returned to its original pre-war composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. It was both a return to normalcy and a marker of post-war recovery. The Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint all struck 1946 nickels, with mintages in the hundreds of millions reflecting a growing economy and the need for circulating coinage to support the post-war boom. The Philadelphia Mint struck the highest mintage at over 161 million pieces. The Denver Mint produced around 45 million, while San Francisco added nearly 14 million, making the S-Mint coins the scarcest of the three in circulation at the time. Collectors today note that while the 1946 nickel is common in lower circulated grades, high-grade uncirculated examples with full steps, details on Monticello are far more elusive. This is due to the quality of striking during the period where weak strikes often plagued Jefferson nickels. Full steps designations are especially prized by collectors and can command significant premiums. The year 1946 itself adds to the historical weight of this coin. America was emerging as a global superpower. The United Nations had just been founded in 1945, and the United States was leading post-war reconstruction. Under the Marshall Plan domestically, the GI Bill was helping returning veterans pursue education and buy homes. Suburbanization was beginning, and the American economy was shifting toward consumer prosperity. In this context, the Jefferson nickel circulated in the pockets of citizens buying groceries, paying bus fares, and fueling the everyday lives of Americans who were stepping into a new chapter of national life. From a design perspective, the coin remained unchanged, with Jefferson's profile on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse. Yet it carried symbolic importance. Jefferson's legacy as a champion of liberty was highlighted in a time when America was positioning itself as the leader of the free world, in contrast to the growing tensions with the Soviet Union that would soon escalate into the Cold War. The nickel's metallic return from silver wartime alloy to copper-nickel blend also symbolized peace, stability, and economic normalcy. Once again, Americans could handle a nickel that looked and felt like the ones before the war for collectors. The 1946 Jefferson nickel represents a pivotal transitional issue. It is not rare in the sense of low mintage, but its historical positioning as the first peacetime nickel after the war makes it significant. The San Francisco Mint issues are scarcer and more challenging to find in higher grades, which adds collecting interest, while error varieties, such as repunched mint marks or doubled dies, though not extremely common, do exist and provide specialists with unique challenges and rewards in building sets. To fully appreciate the 1946 nickel, one must also place it in the broader timeline of the Jefferson nickel series. The early years from 1938 to 1941 saw the introduction and establishment of Schlag's design. Then the war years from 1942 to 1945 introduced the silver alloy nickels, which have always fascinated collectors for their wartime context. Then 1946 marked the return to the classic alloy and symbolized the nation's shift to peacetime. By the late 1940s and into the 1950s, Jefferson nickels would continue to circulate widely, becoming one of the most familiar and stable denominations in American coinage history, beyond numismatics. The 1946 nickel tells us about the psychology of a nation. Coins are daily objects handled by millions, yet they capture the mood of their time. In 1946, the nation was filled with optimism and rebuilding energy. The soldiers were back, industries were booming, and coins like the Jefferson nickel were the currency of this prosperity. Each one circulated in countless hands, buying newspapers, ice cream sodas, streetcar tickets, and small luxuries that symbolized the return of peace. In the decades Since the 1946 nickel has become a staple of collections, especially for those building complete Jefferson nickel sets from 1938 onward, its value in circulated condition remains modest, but in uncirculated condition with sharp details and lustrous surfaces, it can fetch strong prices. Registry set collectors especially seek out coins with full steps designations, as these demonstrate the pinnacle of quality and strike precision from an era when such coins were not easy to produce. When you look closely at a 1946 Jefferson nickel, you see more than metal. You see the transition from war to peace, from scarcity to abundance, from uncertainty to optimism. You see the image of Thomas Jefferson, whose ideals continued to inspire a post-war America charting its destiny on the world stage. You see Monticello standing firm like the Republic itself, resilient after global conflict, and you see the craftsmanship of the United States Mint, resuming traditional practices after years of extraordinary wartime measures. This coin, therefore, is not merely a 5-cent piece. It is a bridge in American history, a marker of return, a symbol of stability, and a tangible reminder of 1946, a year when the world was being reshaped and the United States was stepping into a new role on the global stage. It continues to fascinate collectors, historians, and storytellers alike, making it one of the most interesting issues in the Jefferson Nickel series. Imagine holding in your hand a simple coin, one that might seem ordinary at first glance. A coin that has passed through countless hands, paid for coffee, newspapers, gasoline, and groceries. A coin that represents not just commerce, but also history, culture, and the evolution of American coinage. This coin is the 1980 Jefferson nickel, a piece of money that tells us far more than its 5-cent value could ever suggest. The Jefferson nickel has been in circulation since 1938, and the year 1980 stands as a fascinating chapter in its long journey to understand the story of this coin. We need to go back to the vision behind it, the man it honors, the design that made it iconic, and the time in which the 1980 issues were struck. Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, was not only the author of the Declaration of Independence, but also a visionary thinker, farmer-scientist, and advocate of liberty. His influence on the young republic was so profound that by the 1930s, the United States Mint sought to honor him on a coin. The nickel was chosen, and beginning in 1938, Jefferson replaced the buffalo nickel design that had graced American coinage for a quarter century. The sculptor Felix Schlag designed the Jefferson nickel, presenting Jefferson's portrait on the obverse and his beloved home Monticello on the reverse. By the time we reached 1980, the Jefferson nickel had already been a familiar sight in pockets for over 4 decades. The world had changed since. Its first minting America had seen the Second World War, the Cold War, the Civil Rights Movement, the space race, and the rise of modern technology. Yet through all those years, the Jefferson nickel remained constant as a symbol of stability and tradition. The 1980 issues are particularly interesting because they represent an era in American coinage defined by the challenges of inflation, the modernization of minting technology, and the sheer scale of production that coins required to meet the demands of a growing population. The 1980 Jefferson nickel was struck at 3 major U.S. mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Philadelphia coins in 1980 carried no mint mark. As was the custom at the time, Denver nickels bore the D mint mark, while San Francisco produced proof issues with the S mint mark. The Philadelphia Mint was the oldest and largest facility producing vast numbers of nickels for circulation, and in 1980, the Philadelphia nickel became one of the most common coins of the decade. The Denver Mint also struck millions, and these coins circulated heavily across the western United States. San Francisco, meanwhile, produced proof nickels in smaller numbers meant not for general commerce, but for collectors and numismatists who valued sharp detailed strikes and mirrored finishes. The 1980 Jefferson nickel weighs 5 grams and is composed of a copper-nickel alloy, 75% copper and 25% nickel. This composition had been standard since 1946, following The end of the wartime silver alloy issues from 1942 to 1945, the diameter is 21. 2 millimeters the edge plane without reading the obverse bears. Jefferson's left-facing portrait, and the reverse shows Monticello with the inscriptions E pluribus unum. Monticello 5 cents, United States of America, and Jefferson's name appearing. On the obverse alongside the national motto, In God We Trust. The year 1980 itself holds significance in American history. It was a time of political transition, with the election of Ronald Reagan marking a shift in the nation's direction. It was a year of economic struggle. Inflation was high. The energy crisis weighed heavily on American families, and the cost of everyday goods was rising. Yet amidst these struggles, the nickel still served as a workhorse of commerce. Every diner vending, machine bus fare box and cash register had nickels moving through them, millions upon millions each day. The Jefferson nickel was truly the backbone of small change transactions. From a numismatic perspective, the 1980 nickel offers fascinating insights. Collectors examine differences between the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco strikes. They study die varieties, small imperfections or differences in design details that can turn an ordinary coin into a rare and valuable collectible. For example, strong strikes where Jefferson's hair details are fully visible and Monticello's steps appear sharp and clear are prized by collectors, especially from the proof issues. These full-step nickels, as they are called, can fetch significant premiums on the market because they demonstrate an exceptional quality of strike that is often lacking in circulation pieces. The production of the 1980 nickel also reveals the technical sophistication of the U.S. Mint. By this time, minting technology had advanced to ensure faster production with higher quality control. Yet despite improvements, the sheer scale of coinage meant imperfections and varieties inevitably slipped through, creating a field of study for dedicated numismatists who catalog every doubling of a letter, every slight misalignment, and every unusual mark that distinguishes one nickel from another in a sea of millions. But the story of the 1980 Jefferson nickel is not just technical, it is also cultural, because when we think about coins, we think about how they connect people across time. A 1980 nickel minted in Philadelphia might have been given as change at a movie theater where someone bought a ticket to watch The Empire Strikes Back, or perhaps used by a child buying candy at a corner store. Maybe a Denver nickel passed through countless toll booths on western highways, or a proof nickel sat safely in a collector's album protected from circulation, waiting to be admired. Decades later, each coin carries with it the human experiences of the time it was struck, and the society it served. Collectors today look back on the 1980 Jefferson nickel with both nostalgia and appreciation. It represents the enduring presence of Jefferson in American coinage. It represents a year of political change and economic challenge. It represents the artistry of Felix Schlag, whose design remained largely unaltered for decades, and it represents the Mint's ability to produce billions of coins that keep the American economy running smoothly, though its face value is only 5 cents. The 1980 nickel embodies layers of history that make it worth far more in memory than in money. As we trace its journey, we realize that the Jefferson nickel is not just a coin, it is a piece of America's story, a reminder of Jefferson's vision, a record of the Mint's craftsmanship, a tool of everyday life, and a collectible that continues to fascinate hobbyists around the world, from its copper-nickel composition to its sharp Monticello. Reverse from its Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco origins to the hands it passed through on its way across America. The 1980 Jefferson nickel is a small object with a large tale, and that tale is one we continue to tell every time we hold it in our hands.